basics of the Epoch apps, both the Lion app and the Epoch Pro app. First we'll go over getting the app requirements, opening the app, connecting it to a single battery. We'll go over what all the fields are and the icons in the app. We'll combine multiple batteries together to show you how that looks on both series and parallel. And then we'll go over some other information like warnings and various other things. Alright, the best way to get the app is to download it on the Play Store or the Apple Store and get it directly from there. There's a couple places where maybe some old documentation where you can get a QR code and get it through there on your phone. I've had some people tell me they've downloaded some old apps and they didn't work correctly, and so we just went to the Play Store, the iPhone Store, the Apple Store I should say, and downloaded it there, and that way you are guaranteed to get the latest and greatest app. Once you get the app, there's some requirements to make the app work. Obviously Bluetooth has to be on, but also location. Your GPS has to be on. So we're going to do both apps. One is the Epoch Lion app, the other one is the Epoch Pro app. The Epoch Lion app is used on all of the Essentials versions except for the 50 amp hour, which uses the Pro app. And in addition, the Start batteries, the dual purpose 120 amp hour and the 300 amp hour batteries use the Pro app. Also on the golf carts, the GC2 batteries I believe use the Pro app as well. But double check on the website for which app you're supposed to have. Once you have the app, to open it, and once those conditions are met, just open it. It'll bring you to this screen here, and it's going to show you everything in Bluetooth range, and you're just looking for your batteries. Depending on the battery you have, it's going to have a different description. Generally you can tell by something like 100 amp hour or 460 amp hour or 300 amp hour. There'll be some numbers in here that are recognizable. So first we're going to open up just one of these batteries. I've got 3 of them here. 3 of the 105 amp hours Essentials. These are my brother's batteries. They were a Christmas gift for him, and I haven't given them to him yet. But we're going to open up one. I'll just do this one. Alright, and then it comes to the top and says it's on. Then we'll go to the bottom. It says dashboard. Okay, and we're going to go to the dashboard, and we're going to scroll up to this box right here, because that is the battery that's on right now. We'll cover this top box in just a second. Over here is state of charge. This battery is 97% state of charge remaining, so it's nearly full. I've just discharged it a little bit on a few things, doing some testing. Over here you have the little V in the circle. That's voltage of the battery. Right now this battery is at 13.3 volts. Over here you've got the A. That's how many amps is coming in or out of the battery. If it's a negative number, it's going out of the battery. If it's a positive number, it's coming into the battery, as in a charge. Volt amps is actually another way to express watts, essentially. So when you power this up and you start to see amps coming in or out, whatever the volts are times the amps should equal watts. But sometimes it's helpful to think in terms of watts. Over here, the arrows in the different directions is cycle count. That will rise as you have cycles up and down. So if I were to discharge this down to 15% and raise it back up to 100%, this would then go to 2. I believe this battery is 85% to count as one cycle. So if I were to only go down to 70% and charge it back up, it won't register a cycle. It's not till that total amount goes up and down enough to equal 85%, and then one cycle will pop up. Over here you've got 101.9 of 105 amp hours remaining. That's just another way to express this 97% in a rough estimation. It's not exact. So these numbers right here are not exact. Alright. Alright, so let's just see what it looks like when we put a load on the battery. We've got just an old school light bulb here. And we're going to pull it out of this battery, which is the one that's up. So let me put this on here. Alright, we've got 5 amp light bulb. It's roughly 5 amps. So come back here and you can see that we're pulling negative 5.1 amps. We're pulling amps out of the battery now. That's why it's a negative number. And over here you can see that number bouncing around a little bit. 67.8 watts, so 13.3 times 5.1 is roughly 67 watts. And this number right here will start to go down, and this number will start to go down, and that's calculated by how many amps we're using over time. So this 97% and this as well, these are the state of charge. Okay, these can get out of sync over time. If I were to bring this battery down to 30% and then charge it back up to 80% and then bring it back down to 25% and up to 95% and do that 10 times, this number would drift from accuracy. And the reason why it does that is because this number is resynced to be accurate at 100%. And 100% is determined by what we charge this battery to and when the amps fall to a certain amount. On this battery we need to get to at least 14.2 volts, and then the amps will fall down to a low amount as that battery gets full at 14.2%, and then this will reset to 100%. And it resets to 100% because it knows that, as measured by those two things, that this battery is actually full. And then every time you discharge and recharge from there, if you don't get back to full, then this will drift over time. Occasionally, if you're way out, you'll see this charge up and you're at 89 or 92%, but your voltage is at 14.2 and it's starting to get fully absorbed. Your amp's dropping. You'll see this go from 89 or 91 bang right to 100%. So that has reset the SOC. Generally speaking, if you're on solar, is when you have a lot of problems with SOC drift. And this is true of any shunt. Doesn't matter if it's in the Epoch battery or even a Victron shunt, over time can drift unless it gets back to the reset criteria, which is what I just described. Let's see what else. Let's combine multiple batteries here. I'm just going to leave this load running. We'll go back to Bluetooth, and we've got the other batteries here. Okay, so we've got 3 batteries online, came to the top. Let's go back to the dashboard. And then we see our 3 batteries, only one of which is pulling a load right here. And you'll see the individual battery information here. But up top, you will see a totalizer. So this totalizes everything. As you know, we have 101.6 amp hours remaining of 105 amp hours, but up here we have 311 of 315 available. So it's totalizing all 3 batteries. And it's still only showing that we're pulling 5 amps because we're only pulling it from one battery. Now if these batteries were electrically connected, it would still pull 5 amps, but it would distribute this over the 3 batteries. That each one would pull like 1.5 amps or 1.3 amps, something like that. So that's how that works. Now if this was a golf cart and you had these wired in series, as you see it says parallel over here, if you had it wired in series, click that button and it will totalize it in a series fashion. So this would be your series voltage, and then it only shows 104 of 105 amp hours because that's how that works when you go in series versus parallel. Parallel, the amp hours is added, the voltage is not. Series, voltage is added, amp hours is not. Just very simple, but this is useful if you've got several batteries online to take a quick look. But then once you take a look at this and go down here, make sure that your load sharing is always equal. If you're in parallel, make sure your voltages should tend to be equal. Right now they're not because this one's under load and it's been slightly discharged. So those are the types of things that you want to look at there. Alright, so now we're going to go to the cells tab right here, and it has some different information. Now one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually take 2 of these batteries offline because this cell voltage average, voltage difference, voltage low, voltage high is also totalized amongst the 3 batteries. So right now I don't want to do that. So we're going to go back to this one and we're going to shut off that one, and we're going to shut off this one. Okay, we're going to go back to the cells tab, and now you can see that this information is just for this one particular battery. And so starting at the top, this is the voltage average of these cells. This battery has 4 cells in it, so you can see the voltage of the 4 cells, and this is the average voltage. Obviously they're all the same, the average is going to be the same. The voltage differential between the cells is 0 right now because they're all the same. Voltage low is whatever of these cells is the lowest, it's going to show it up here. Voltage high is going to show it as well. So these are just references. But what it's mostly useful for is to look at the voltage difference. So if the cells and the batteries are in balance, especially at the top of the charge, what they call the upper knee, when it gets up around 14, 14.1, 14.2 volts during a charge, you want to look at this and see how far out they are. You might be 30 millivolts, 0.030 volts differential at the top of the charge, because the cells will begin to split in the upper knee and the upper voltage. And this will tell you the health of the battery as a whole, because if you have a huge differential here, like say this was 0.0335 or something like that, you got a problem on your hands. Either you're not charging it right over time, you're short cycling it or whatever, or there's an actual problem with the battery, and that's how you would tell. So typically when you first get these batteries, they're a little bit of a split between the cells, but on the first charge or two, they'll start to align at the top of the charge. But the main thing to look for here is that the differential stays narrow or grows narrower over time, not increases over time with subsequent charges. But again, in order to do the balancing to get this differential closer over time, you need to get up in the upper voltages, at least 13.8, 13.9, 14, 14.1, 14.2, and that will do balancing. And it only balances in that upper range. So if you're not charging the full, you're not getting any balancing going on, and these cells can split over time. This is just the battery model. Again, cells, temperature of the inside of the battery. Some different batteries have different number of temperature sensors. Typically, the larger the battery, the more number of temperature sensors that you have in there. But if you're worried about cold weather charging, this is the one that you need to look at. If it's 32 or below, or maybe 31 and below, I don't remember, you're not going to be allowed to charge the battery, because charging the battery below freezing is detrimental to the cells. You can still discharge below freezing, but you can't charge. If this goes to 30 degrees, the heater will not kick on automatically. It won't use the battery's power to run the heater. The heater will only kick on when this is below 32 and you apply a charge with a charger. All right, it takes external power to power the heater internally. And there'll be like a little fire icon somewhere that tells you it's internally heating. Now, another thing about cold weather charging is once it's below 32 and you apply a charge, it has to raise this temperature above 41 before the cells will begin taking a charge, and you would see amps coming in a positive fashion. So just know that there's a hysteresis in there, that if it drops below 32, then it has to rise above 41 before the cells will begin to charge, or the battery will begin to take a charge. The reason for that is because they want to make sure, there's a lot of mass in these battery cells, so they want to make sure that there's plenty of margin there, and that the cells are heated all the way through, so they make it a little bit higher. So if it goes below 32, it has to rise above 41 before it will charge, and it needs external power to heat the blanket. What else about this? Oh, one other thing about this. So you've got the charge MOSFET and the discharge MOSFET. Okay, now typically don't mess with these. You can turn them off and on. So like for instance, right now we're pulling 5 amps. If I hit the discharge MOSFET, my light just went out. Okay, I'll turn it back on. But generally don't do that. Mainly you want the BMS to control these MOSFETs, and the reason for that is for several reasons. Number one, the BMS is monitoring all kinds of parameters: temperatures, voltages, and currents mainly. And if there's an exceedance in any of those parameters for a safe operating envelope of voltages, the low voltage cutoff, the high voltage cutoff, low temperature, high temperature, short circuit, those types of things, then the only way that the BMS has to have some control over it is to stop the charge or stop the discharge. So if you get to very low cell voltages and the BMS detects that it's too low, it's going to shut off the discharge MOSFET, and the BMS is going to do that. You don't have to do it. So let the BMS do the controlling of these MOSFETs, generally speaking. If you're just messing around in the garage, or you're present on the boat and you're trying to do something or test something, yeah, you can use them. You can go ahead and use them. But generally speaking, don't shut off discharge MOSFETs with the battery at 10% and go away for 6 months. because it may discharge below a certain amount and you might never recover. So just typically don't mess with them. If you need to shut it off, you know, you really should have battery isolation switches on these things, and that's really the preferable method for long-term storage. Don't use these discharge MOSFETs, all right, or charge MOSFETs. So the MOSFETs are the way that the BMS has an effect on the battery to stop the discharge or the charge if things get too hot, too cold, too much amperage, or too much voltage. Okay. One other thing that these are very, very useful for is troubleshooting. I can't tell you how many calls I get where the battery's not charging or the battery's not discharging. All right, and they've got a system on a camper or a boat or something like that, and they're saying, I'm just not getting anything out, or they're not taking a charge. You know, I'm stalled at 15% state of charge and 12.8 volts or something like that, and it's just not, the battery's broken, it's not taking a charge. Well, just come to this page, look at the charge MOSFET if it's not taking a charge, look at the discharge MOSFET if it's not putting out power. If these are on, it's a direct path in wiring from either your charger to the cells in this battery, or from the cells of this battery to the loads. So if these are on and you're not getting power out, if these are on and you're not getting power out, start looking at fuses, start looking at your wiring, start looking at the thing you're trying to power, if it's broken or not. If you're trying to charge and the charge MOSFET is on, start looking at your charger, start looking at your charge parameters, start looking at fuses, start looking at connections, because when these are on, this might as well be a lead acid battery. It's got power ready to come in, it's got power ready to go out. So these are very useful in troubleshooting. As soon as you think something's not right, come here and check the actual voltage. Don't always look at SOC. Check the actual voltage. Check the state of your charge and discharge MOSFETs. That's going to tell you a lot of information on what they're doing and what you should be troubleshooting next. I can tell you about 999 times out of 1,000, it's typically the customer's equipment. The charger's not set right, or a fuse was blown because they touched a wire during installation or something like that. So extremely useful to know the position of your charge and discharge MOSFETs when troubleshooting. All right, I think that's it for this one. We'll do the Epoch Pro app, which is quite a bit different, in another video. More later.